Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm appalled by the Republican gamesmanship around the debt limit. I heard a Republican colleague on this committee complain about not receiving a phone call from the administration or complain that we, the Democrats, are too partisan. The Republican argument seems to be the following, that since the Democrats have been mean to us, we are going to sabotage the full faith and credit of the United States to exact revenge against those who have slighted us. And that kind of pettiness has me wondering, are we in high school or the United States Congress? Now, it has to be said that the debt limit, raising the debt limit, would not authorize new spending. It would simply pay the debts of previous administrations, including the Trump administration. So the Republicans cannot pass $2 trillion worth of tax cuts and then refuse to pay back the debt that made those tax cuts possible in the first place. That to me is worse than fiscal responsibility. That's fiscal hypocrisy. And I support Congressman Foster's legislation abolishing the debt limit so that we're no longer at the whims of bruised egos slighted by unreturned phone calls. Suppose for a moment it is October 18th. The use of extraordinary measures is exhausted. What happens on October 19th?
We're simply in an impossible situation in which it will be impossible for Treasury on that day or a few days thereafter, depending on we'll have very limited resources that will be run down quickly. We won't be able to pay all of the government's bills. The Treasury has been directed by Congress to pay all of the government's bills, to use the tax revenues that are available, and without that to issue debt. And the debt ceiling will make it impossible for us to do that.
And the damage could be irreparable.
Well, yes, and we got a taste of that in 2011. When the debt ceiling wasn't raised until the last minute. The fact that Congress might not raise the debt limit and call into question whether or not what is regarded as the safest asset in the world, dollar-denominated U.S. Treasury debt, will actually be repaid is simply a catastrophic event.
I want to follow up on an exchange you had with Congressman Budd, who asked you about the debt to GDP ratio. The U.S. debt to GDP ratio is over 100%. What is Japan's debt to GDP ratio?
Excuse me?
What is Japan's debt to GDP ratio?
It's about 250%.
It's the highest in the world.
Yes, it is.
And Japan is regarded as a successful economy.
It is, and Japan also has low interest rates and has not found.
And I agree with your premise that the cost of servicing debt is a more reliable measure of debt sustainability than the debt to GDP ratio. And if we were to breach the debt limit, as Republicans would have us do, it would actually raise the cost of borrowing. It would raise interest rate payments, which would make our debt burden less sustainable, not more.
That is absolutely correct. It would be regarded as riskier. We might suffer, again, a credit downgrade. And coming out of that, we could expect to see higher interest rates on Treasury debt and on the debt that private individuals have, mortgage debt, credit card debt, auto loans, and everything else.
I want to quickly ask you about a Title IV loan under the CARES Act. During the Trump administration, the largest recipient of the Title IV national security loan was a trucking company, previously known as YRC Worldwide and presently known as Yellow Corporation. Do you think a nearly bankrupt trading company whose conduct is the subject of a DOJ lawsuit for overcharging should have received the national security loan from the Trump administration?
I'm afraid I don't know the details of that, and I'd be glad to have our staff get back to you on that.
And I want to be clear that this loan is the subject of scrutiny from the Bipartisan Congressional Oversight Commission and the Select Subcommittee on the Coronavirus. You said that at the end of September, the funding for the emergency rental assistance might be reallocated. Up to how much funding might be reallocated?
I can't give you a dollar estimate, but the objective would be to shift it to areas where there's need and proven success in getting it out.
And if the use of extraordinary measures is exhausted on October 18th, what does the Federal Reserve do on October 19th? What actions do you take in response, if any? And that'll be my final question.
I guess I would just say no one should assume that we can really do much to if there were to be a default on our obligations, no one should assume that the Fed or anyone else can fully shield the American people from the consequences of that.
My time has expired, so.